How was the trusted family doctor, a pillar of the community in the small English town of Hyde, to the thousands of people who quite literally entrusted him with their lives? Dr. Harold Shipman was just an old fashioned, hard working general practitioner. He made house calls, he was always there, but behind that mask of compassion was a monstrous secret. This respected physician was also Britain's most prolific serial killer, a predator who turned his medical license into a weapon. For years, his unusual high patient death rate was dismissed and ignored. This is a chilling story of how one man became Dr. Death, murdering his patients in their own homes in plain sight. It all started to unravel with a single suspicious document, a crudely typed will, riddled with errors that would expose a secret kept for more than 2 decades. This was the will belonged to Kathleen Grundy, an active, healthy 81-year-old, and it left her entire fortune, nearly £400,000, to her doctor, Harold Shipman. For her daughter, who was a lawyer herself, this document wasn't just suspicious, it was unbelievable. It was one clumsy mistake, that one act of brazen greed, that would finally trigger an investigation and unearth a truth far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined.
Blood on the grass won't wash away. Undetected.
So, how did he get away with it for so long? First, you have to understand the man the community thought they knew. Shipman arrived in Hyde, a working class town near Manchester, back in 1977. Over the years, he built a reputation as a dedicated, if sometimes arrogant, general practitioner. By 1992, he'd set up his own solo practice on Market Street, which gave him complete autonomy. He had over 3,000 patients. They saw him as a doctor who cared, someone who would go to the extra mile. He often made house calls to his elderly patients, a practice that was already becoming rare. He seemed like a dependable, reassuring presence. That trust, so freely given, became his most powerful tool. It created a cloak of respectability, so thick that no one could see the darkness hiding right underneath it. He was, for all intents and purposes, the perfect family doctor. But that darkness didn't just appear overnight. Its roots traced back to his childhood. Born in a working class family in Nottingham in 1946, Harold was incredibly close to his mother, Vera. When he was 17, he watched her die a slow, painful death from lung cancer. In her final days, a doctor administered morphine at home to ease her suffering, a moment that left a profound and disturbing mark on the teenage Shipman. Many have speculated this experience forged a twisted link in his mind between a physician's power, opiates, and the act of dying. He graduated from Leeds University Medical School in 1970, but his early career was almost immediately tainted. By 1975, he was caught forging prescriptions for the powerful opiate pethidine for his own use. He had become an addict. He was fined, forced to rehab, and given a formal warning. But crucially, he was not struck off the medical registry. The system gave him a second chance, a grave error in judgment that allowed him to continue practicing medicine and eventually to start killing. After rehab, Shipman moved to a practice in Hyde in 1977 and later established his own surgery in 1992. And this is where his quiet, methodical killing spree escalated dramatically. His method was chillingly simple and brutally effective. He preyed on the most vulnerable, primarily elderly women who lived alone and trusted him completely. His weapon of choice was diamorphine, pure medical grade heroin. He visited his victims at home, often pretending it was a routine checkup or that he was taking a blood sample. Then he would administer a lethal overdose. These were not mercy killings. His victims, for the most part, weren't terminally ill. They were simply old, and they were convenient. After the injection, he would wait for them to die, and then the cover up would begin. Shipman evaded detection for over 20 years by abusing the very system designed to protect patients. As a doctor who had been present at or near the time of death, he was the one who signed the death certificate. He would just invent a plausible cause, old age, a heart attack, a stroke, and the system accepted his word. He also became an expert at manipulating grieving families. When a patient died unexpectedly, he put on a show of quiet authority, explaining that their loved one had simply passed away peacefully. He had advised against an autopsy, telling families it was unnecessary and would only cause more distress. Trusting their doctor, they almost always agreed. And he was meticulous, altering his patients' digital medical records. After a murder, he would go back into their files and create false entries, inventing symptoms and conditions that would justify a sudden death. Police would later discover that these entries were often made just hours after he had killed the patient. But some people were noticing in March of 1998, a fellow general practitioner, Dr. Linda Reynolds, saw an alarming number of Shipman's patients were dying and noted the sheer volume of cremation forms she was being asked to countersign. She reported her fears to the coroner, which triggered a covert police investigation, but the investigation was bungled by inexperienced officers. They found insufficient evidence to press charges and closed the case just a month later. Shipman was free to kill 3 more times. His final victim would be his undoing. Kathleen Grundy was a vibrant, wealthy 81-year-old and a former mayoress of Hyde who was in excellent health. On June 24, 1998, Shipman visited her home for a supposed routine blood test. Instead, he injected her with a fatal dose of diamorphine. When her body was found later that day, Shipman was called to the scene. He declared her dead from old age. But this time, Shipman made a fatal error. Driven by pure greed, a new will for Mrs. Grundy suddenly appeared, leaving her entire estate of $386,000 to Dr. Shipman and cutting her own daughter and grandchildren. The will is a clumsy forgery, typed on an old manual typewriter, and the signature clearly wasn't Mrs. Grundy's. Her daughter, Angela Woodruff, a lawyer herself, was immediately suspicious. She went to the police, and this time, they listened. The investigation kicked into high gear. Kathleen Grundy's body was exhumed, and toxicology reports found what Shipman must have thought was impossible to find: a lethal dose of diamorphine. Police arrested him on September 7, 1998. A search of his surgery uncovered the brother's typewriter used to forge the will. Detectives then launched a massive investigation, poring over his patient records. A horrifying pattern emerged. A staggering number of deaths, mostly elderly women, who died suddenly at home right after a visit from Shipman. They exhumed more bodies and found more evidence of murder by opiate overdose. His computer records provide the digital smoking gun, showing exactly how he'd altered patient histories after they were already dead. In October of 1999, Harold Shipman went on trial for 15 specimen counts of murder and 1 count of forgery. Throughout the proceedings, he remained defiant and arrogant, showing no emotion. He maintained his innocence, but the evidence was overwhelming. On January 31st, 2000, the jury found him guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 15 concurrent life sentences with a recommendation that he'd never be released, calling his actions wicked, wicked crimes. But the trial only scratched the surface. After the conviction, the government launched a massive public inquiry chaired Dr. Dame Janet Smith to determine the true scale of Shipman's crimes. Shipman inquiry was one of the largest investigations in British legal history. For over 2 years, it examined the records of hundreds of Shipman's former patients. Its final report was staggering. The inquiry concluded that Harold Shipman had murdered at least 215 of his patients, and there was a real suspicion that he had killed 45 more. The total number of victims was estimated to be around 250 people. The murders had begun as far back as 1971. He had been killing for nearly 3 decades. The story of Harold Shipman is a chilling reminder of how easily trust can be betrayed. If you found this investigation compelling, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel for more deep dives into complex cases that reveal the dark side of human nature. Harold Shipman never confessed. He never explained why he did it, taking his secrets with him when he hung himself in his prison cell on January 13, 2004, the day before his 58th birthday. His motives remain a subject of debate. Was it an addiction to killing, as one expert suggested, a God complex, or was it all a twisted reenactment of his mother's death? We'll likely never know for sure. What we do know is that his crimes shattered the bedrock of trust between doctors and patients in Britain. The case led to sweeping changes in medical procedures, including how deaths are certified and how doctors are monitored. But perhaps the most profound legacy is the chilling knowledge that a man entrusted to preserve life chose instead to become one of modern history's most prolific takers of it all, while hiding in plain sight.
Blood on the grass won't wash away. Undetected.